All right, welcome back to the Conquest Corner. On this particular episode, last week we did the worst units by faction, or worst regiments, I should say, by faction, and this week we're going to do best. Now, I'm going to cheat a little bit on this because finding worst was a little bit easier. I know in the video I kind of went back and forth on some units, but I had reasonably decent feelings about the ones I picked. Now, of course, when we talk about this, we are talking about a little bit of the thought process in general. We're looking at this reasonably holistically as best we can. A regiment is more than just the rules it has, its points, and all of that. It also depends on who can take them. Do you want to take them? Is there better options or worse options? Do their points match the sort of things they do? Does what they do for that particular army work? Does it complement the play style or play styles? Do the army rules work well for it? Is it in congruence with that, or is it opposing it? All those sort of thoughts. I found it easier to pick what I felt were reasonably bad, and not always. When we take a look at maybe certain examples, like say Spires, not necessarily that the options I picked were actively bad, just they didn't seem like they had a good fit. You know, a good unit feels like you can build lists around it, or they're often in your list, or I'm going to build a list for 100 kingdoms. Okay, here's my first unit. I'm putting that in, or the character to take that regiment, and now I have to figure out some other things. Where it feels a lot of times like the units that we pick to call bad, we're picking them and we're saying, okay, well, how am I going to support this? How am I going to make this actually work for my army? I'm taking this. Yeah, there's better options, but I wanted to take it anyway, or I'm gonna find a way to make it work. That sort of feel. I found that when I was trying to pick the best, I was essentially always going back and forth between two. So I'm going to essentially name the unit, but I'm also going to name the runner-up. And I'll be honest, depending on the day, I swap to at least some extent which one, and I'll explain a little bit as to why. So we did talk a little bit at least about why I'm making some of the selections that I am, my sort of thought process in making this. I will say at time of recording, I have not looked at the comments yet on the previous video. I know there's a decent amount. I forget exactly how many, but I do want to look through those. I've been busy at work, and I want to, in case someone is saying something that I want to actively respond to, I want to be able to have some time to sit down and actually write something out. So I do love at least that it's got people talking. That's always fun. Hopefully this does as well. And hopefully, for the things that I pick, there's some sense to it. Maybe you somewhat feel the same way, but especially if you either feel the same way or if you don't, if you're on YouTube, leave some comments, talk about the reason why you agree, disagree, or what you see as the best. I do think, especially for some of these armies that have some varied playstyles, we're thinking, say, about 100 Kingdoms, for instance, where you essentially have different types of orders or theists and all of that. You have these different pieces, warbands, or however you want to put it. I don't care if they're wording for the second, but essentially you have all these different divisions. Depending on which one you like, you might disagree with what's, say, super good or not, just because, I can't take, all of them intermixed. Maybe you're a little bit more restricted with those choices, or the rules themselves restrict you. Because it's for dynastic alliances, it's orders and theists. That's what it was. I think of guys on horses, because that's pretty much to me what orders are. But, if I pick one of those sides, you may not feel that way just because you don't take the other side, because maybe your list doesn't go that way, or you don't have the unit potentially as well. But that's a little bit of the thoughts bringing into this. And keep in mind, if you are looking to pick up any of the stuff we talk about, or any of the new stuff coming out, or whatever else, we do have a discount code in the show notes. It's Train Kickers. It saves you 10%, helps us out as well. But now, with all that out of the way, let's take a look at the first faction. All right, and let's take a look at 100 Kingdoms, so they're the ones up first. So for this, like I said, I'm going to name what I think is the top unit, and then I'm going to name runner-up that, honestly, depending on the day, I go back and forth on. 100 Kingdoms provide some extra little bit of challenge, because when we consider their army rules, like I said, theists and the orders can't go together. I know, okay, you pick feudal, they get the other one's rule, and also, so there's some synergies and bonuses to consider to a light extent. But when I wanted to pick for this faction, what I wanted to pick for the main, when I was going back and forth on this, I wanted to pick something that adds to the faction what the faction either needs more of, or would very greatly help it out. And what I'm thinking there, as I picked Order of the Crimson Tower, um, I do think Ash and Dawn are very good. They're a little bit more expensive. They do very different things. Ash and Dawn want to get into the combat, Order of the Crimson Tower want to hit you in combat. In other words, they want to essentially charge into you, where Ash and Dawn actually want to swing. And honestly, the reason why I edged them out, yes, Ash and Dawn are a little bit more expensive. You can't buy them over 3, which the fact that you can do that with Crimson Tower, I think, is nice, because I do think sometimes you want a little bit more than a 3 block, especially because you can put your character in there and maybe get a little bit extra out of it as well. But the other main reason why I didn't want to end up picking them is just because this army already has quite a few pieces that want to get stuck in and swing. The issue the army often finds is survivability. At least now, it's better than it used to be, but I'm still finding when I face them, you got a lot of guys on like 3 saves, on 4 wounds. Resolve usually not so great. Maybe you're taking a big enough brick, or you have a character in there. Not necessarily the best resolve numbers. So, squishy humans, essentially. Ash and Dawn hit like a truck, and they survive very well, but they need to be stuck in the whole time. That automatically means that in reality, I really want to be charge attacking with these guys. I need to be closer. Am I that worried if an opponent hits me? Maybe not so much, but they kind of already do an aspect that the army was doing. What I like about Crimson Tower instead is Crimson Tower can sit, 15 inches away, move charge in. They're getting, their impact 4. They have wedge. So, the cleave part doesn't really help. Devastating charge, there it is. An extra impact if they've done a move charge, and line breaker. So, okay, they're brutal 2. But if you have shields, it's effectively like having brutal 3. Or if you have any of the other defensive rules that line breaker can break down, it's a shield bastion. So if you have all the special rules, I don't care about those. Those are the most common. It doesn't affect phalanx, but phalanx is not very common in the game. Those ones are much, much more common. So you're brutal 2, unless they have good evade, you're probably not really getting much of a save, if any save whatsoever. They're sitting at 4 / if they're doing this, 5 impacts a guy. They're on 3s. I said they have the wedge, but that's going to give them, if they happen to be close enough to swing as well, so they will have some cleave on that particular turn if they get it. But what's nice about them is you can sit far away and get in there. The rest of your army lacks some of the speed, unless you're taking, your cav units. You lack some of the speed and maneuverability that some of the other factions have, because you are, for all intents and purposes, somewhat regular humans. Here's a unit that can go rushing forward, or can help cover a flank, pop in front of a different unit. It can do the things that you want. It's a little bit cheaper than Ash and Dawn, and it provides that ability of the much longer range threat. Yes, I don't want to get stuck in against Ash and Dawn, but if these guys charge into me, I might not have very much left to worry about that getting stuck in. And let's face it, at 5 wounds, 4s and 4s because of that shield, assuming, say, you're in the front, they're still survivable. It's not like they're suddenly going down easily or something like that. Yes, their units, I'll take them out. What also helps them is, of course, they can always take the prior commander. If he's giving them their supremacy, then hey, they'll get an extra attack in the hardened. That will really help for the turns they get stuck in. So I picked Crimson Tower as my winner. Now, for my backup, I actually went Gilded Legion. A few reasons I want Gilded Legion. Again, when I play, and maybe it's the list that I play against, or the list that I build in my mind, or all of that, but when I'm going against 100 Kingdoms, what I find their issue is sticking. Hey, you got some decent attacks on some pieces, or hey, you got some cool rules. Imperial Ranger Corps, they're going to do a lot of good. Yeah, but someone looks at them funny, they're gone. Mercenary Crossbowmen, or I wasn't a huge fan of Longbowmen. It's not that they're bad. Take them, yeah, but if anyone gets close to them, they're down. Mounted Squires are nice if someone's shooting, but you get into close combat, they're going to take it pretty hard to the face. You have Crusaders, all of that. So you have good options. Or if you think of what is it? Say Steel Legion or something like that. The problem is they don't take the punch. And in this game, one thing you need to be able to do is grab your points, sit somewhere, or take a charge. Because no matter how good your plan is, your opponent is going to get to hit you. Pike formation, so your impacts don't really matter if you can angle correctly, and you don't put these guys in a spot where someone can rush around the side. You put them maybe towards an edge and angled, so that way they can kind of push forward. They naturally have a cleave of 1. That's something your army, in many ways, is somewhat lacking. You don't have a lot of cleave in this army. You have spots of it, but it's not as common. Iron Discipline, so you don't care when things hit you in different spots other than, say, that pike formation. You swing just about as much as from any side as anyone else, whether they're touching or not. And Draw Event Bastion. So if they can go first, they're sitting on 4s and 4s. Effectively 4s and 4s. Pretty good. Nice cleave, all of that. You can take that Drill Master if you want to get extra attacks and Vanguard 4. For 20 points, that's a pretty good feel, because now you're sitting on 5 attacks. You still have that 4 wound. That's very common for you. But I like them as to hit and to take a hit. Yes, there's units who will still carve through these guys, like, a knife through a hot knife through butter rather than a knife through hot butter, which I guess would just be melted. It would get through it easily as well. But they have some of the extras to help them survive. And, you take some Armor of Dominion or something like that, and now these guys can really go and sit somewhere. And 40 points an extra stand, that's not really that much to be able to kind of get them to the sizes you might be seeing 100 Kingdoms at. All right, so that is my 1 and 2. Although depending on my day, if you are not taking orders because you want, like I said, Imperial with Theus or anything like that, taking some Gilded Legion, I think, is a pretty good option. I was also going back and forth, just for completeness sake, on, like, say, Mercenary Crossbowmen or Hunter Cadre, because that gives you a little bit of something that you don't naturally have. But I think you have to go with the staples. Oh, here's a unit that does a cool thing. Yeah, but am I always going to worry about that? Not so much. I'm probably always going to want to take these guys. So, first and second place. All right, next up is Dweg. Again, I'm doing the order I did the other video as well. So, I said, for most of these, I'm going to talk about what I kind of put first and where I was with second as well. I really went back and forth on this now. We know Dweg are getting a redo, so anything we say here very well could change. Any particular thoughts we have might no longer be those thoughts in, I don't know, a month, 2 months, who knows. I thought we would have heard more before, but we didn't, so whenever it happens to fall. But I think with them, you have to consider character options, what the main types of lists are, and the lists that, at least I've seen lately, that seem to be doing well, or at least well for Dweg, well in general, tend to be more shooting type lists. Tempered Sorcerers, Hell Drakes, Iron Drakes for backup, all that kind of stuff, some, Ballistas and all. And that's the reason why, for these particular guys, I gave it to Fireforged. Fireforged, a few things. 1, medium. Not very tough to get. They have a couple options to be able to actually grab them. Perfectly good stat lines in terms of defense, 4s and the 3s. So very much in that Dweg, sitting at the 3 and 4 kind of level. The big thing is reasonably good price. 180 is not bad for what you get here, because you're getting 4 shots a pop, command stand at 5. So you're getting, 13 shots, 14 inches, which is a decent range, at AP2. So if you're able to aim and shoot, you're now looking at 6 to 7, maybe 8 if you spike a little bit of armor piercing 2 shots. Target, assuming you're not going against, a Volva led Nords list where everyone's like sitting on like evade 2s. If you're not sitting on that, AP2 is going to actually really crunch through some people. Depending on the army you're going against, I'm thinking about if you're facing my Sorcerer Kings, a lot of my stuff doesn't have evade or has like a evade of 1, like defense 3, evade 1. Okay, so I'm on 1s. I'm taking legitimate damage from this. Standard, you can if you want. I don't care about it, but you can if you want. And then you could always grab one of the one of the attachments. So you could give yourself torrential fire. Keep in mind, if you are in effective range, every 2 hits get you 1 extra. So you could start really buffing that up if you think you're getting close. Don't do the one for, the spell part's kind of good, but otherwise no. So if you want to keep them at, say, 180, you're fine. If you want to put them at 205, someone gets close enough, or you get close enough to them, because you actually have some stats to be able to get closer. When you consider ranged units, they actually have some decent defense. They actually have defense. They're sitting on a decent defense. They actually have the 3 attacks on Clash 2. I'm not saying they're going to go fight their way and destroy people in close combat, but you're a little less worried than when you're looking at a lot of things that are like defense 1s and all of those. Like I said, not so bad to take. Fire Forge, no. I always forget who takes what because I don't run these guys enough. So you can, excuse me, you can be restricted on Hull Ray, and I know the Temper Sorcerer takes them as mainstay. Your Temper Sorcerer can take them as a mainstay, so that way you can take a Hellbringer Drake that he's going to go stand on. That's a very, very common tactic. Usually you have 2 Tempered Sorcerers, both of them are on Hell Drakes, both are taking Fire Forged, and then you sprinkle the rest of the stuff in, depending on what you want to take. So I gave the Fire Forged. I think they give you something. The rest of this army is pretty good at standing and staying and keeping people back to an extent. They're not as defensive as they used to be, but you can do that. This lets you start getting put that pressure on. Remember, you don't lose your reinforcement zone. Your reinforcement is wherever your units are. You don't care if they're engaged or anything like that. But you are a bit slower. Here's you outputting some damage, essentially 19 inches effective range. For certain shooting units, I like them being medium, because that means if my opponent has lights, they might have already done some movements, committed some spots, and I can choose, do I want to contest against that with my 14-inch shot or 19-inch if I'm moving on, or do I want to go nowhere near it because of what it can do to me? So there's quite a few times when a medium is actually a really good spot for a shooting unit, so they can maybe be a little bit delayed to get what they want. For my runner-up, you could easily go Hellbringer Drake, because I think Hellbringer Drake's really good. Actually, I might end up going Hellbringer Drake or Ironclad. Originally, I was going back and forth with this and Flame Berserkers, because Flame Berserkers give you the things that you want for this army. They set your reinforcement line very nicely in that first turn, getting up to that 12. For your moves, it actually might still help you out, or at least to get the sides. But even if not, the next turn, now they can get you to half the board if they want. They have lots of attacks, very good stats at 3s and 4s, 5 wounds a pop. They're Aura of Death, so they want to go engage that lighter unit, smack them down, anything that's left, take them out with Aura of Death. So I was really leaning towards Flame Berserkers. I am back and forth on if I'd want it to be that or Hellbringer. Hellbringer, but the problem is, okay, the Hellbringer himself is good. He's much better with the Sorcerer on top, and I don't want this to be with requiring the character as well. So, would I take a Hellbringer right now without a Tempered Sorcerer on it? Personally, no. It's not to say that it won't do work. Overcharge is great. You can get quite a bit out of that. But I think the Sorcerer on top, just pumping out that extra, really does a lot more for you. Also, its survivability, you're sitting on those 14 wounds. You're evade 2, so you're probably on 2s. You resolve 3, but you are not immune to terrifying. I've taken out many of these with something that has, say, terrifying, because then it just takes a bunch of damage from it. So I'd probably still go Flame Berserker than Hellbringer, because if I'm not taking the character, I don't know if I'm doing it. Where with the Flame Berserkers, I think they just add a facet that you would want and need. I've watched many a list have multiple Flame Berserkers, and their job is to rush forward, hit you in the face, and keep you back. It's a very common Nord strategy. Nords have a strategy of, you can't score points if I've stopped you in the backfield. And even if I'm not destroying you, even if you take me out, if I hold you back for a little bit, I will be able to score, get into position, and then do you have time to claw back? Flame Berserkers can do that for you. And I think right now, for Dweg Home, that's kind of something that they might need. I don't think Dweg Home are terrible, but they're a little bit behind the 8 ball, especially in terms of rules. Here's some guys with good rules. And, I know if you take, I think it's Ardent Karawa, as a leader, getting those extra attacks on your command stand and being able to challenge with them, now you actually have a stand that can absolutely take people out. All right, so Fire Forged are number 1. The honorable mention is Flame Berserkers. All right, next one we went to was Nords. I said this in the video where I talked about the units that I like the least. And the big thing with Nords is I like everything. I think Nords are very strong. We've seen a lot of their strength. I've fought against them, put lists together for them and all. They impose will very, very well. And in a war game, essentially, the two of us are trying to impose our wills on each other through army rules, tricks, tactics, and all of that. And they're very good at that aspect. You tend to often have to try to claw back out after what they've done to you. And that immediately kind of puts you to an advantage. I had just as much issue picking the top as I did the bottom because I do see some different types of lists. I was going back and forth. Originally, I said, well, I talked about Fenrir maybe not being so great because gold tier are just better in most cases. So I was going back and forth on that. I think they're probably my runner-up just because I know they're also super good. And I will admit, I see them as a stat block. I have not faced them. So I do find I usually need to actually be across the board from it to get to really solidify my viewpoints. I went back and forth on Werewolves because I think Werewolves with a Vargar Lord, absolutely, they can be in your back with their speed and all of that. They can just be sitting in your backfield. Regen 3, so I don't even care about taking the wounds that they take. And 3 is enough to get us stand back if you've taken a little bit. But this is the spot where I took for my first monster. And I went with Yoron. Now, obviously not for everyone. Obviously not a guarantee, but I do like monsters. So I do want to make sure I pick a few monsters. I don't think I picked many brutes, honestly. Or I guess cavalry, or I know they're not technically brutes, but they're brute-like stands. But I took Yoron, and I took it for a few different reasons. One, it has some decent ways to be taken. There's a couple people who can take it, which isn't too bad. Good move, good amount of attacks with Cleave 3, which that's something your army doesn't have a lot of outside of the monsters. You have a decent amount of swings and impacts and stuff, but you don't really cleave so well. And let's face it, there are things that you absolutely have to just cut through. The Terrifying obviously helps with any of these. Good amount of wounds, good defense resolve. It's got the evade too, so it's really not getting hit too hard. Good amount of impacts. And it also gets the casting. So you could ice armor if you want to get the extra defense, so 4s and 4s. So you could charge someone, swing. What often happens, the reason why I say sometimes brutes are stronger than monsters, and this could be a whole separate discussion, but to very briefly put that, a lot of times when you do that charge, swing, and wipe, now you're standing there, and if you did it early, because maybe I did it early because of what's going to happen, I have to get in there before maybe you hit me with a certain unit. But now I'm just standing there. And now all of your other units that wanted to do something to me have that option. A lot of monsters tend to sit on 3s and 4s, maybe sometimes 3s and 3s, or maybe they have a little bit of a bonus or something like that. But a lot of the monsters have a hard time taking all the hits back. Because we're assuming your opponent has something with some good attacks or good strength to it. Well, getting your free cast, going to 4s and 4s, now puts you as a very strong monster. Having the evaded 2 means no matter how great their cleave is, you still have a reasonable save with a good resolve. Even if they are terrifying, because you're not immune to it either, you're still sitting on 3s, which is a good number. We have some other ones like we just saw. Helldrakes are sitting on, might already be on 3s and then have that. Priest 5 is a decent amount of dice to be able to get this to go off. Not a great amount, but it's enough. You can encase them. I'm not as concerned about that. I do think it's useful, especially if someone was going to be trying to either reach you or walk past you, kind of thing. And Storm, just 2 hits per success. So did I not quite take out that unit? I really need them gone. I can get a spell. I can hit them with that, get a couple, get 4, maybe 6 hits. That'll be enough to take them down. Hopefully. So I saw this as, if I'm building a list, for them, it's not what is the unit I must include. Because I don't know if there's an absolute must include. I think that changes on the day. I think gold tier might almost be, but then again, I can make an argument for werewolves. I could make an argument, for certain Huskarls, bear sharks being able to do all the things that they do. Bear sharks, yes, or was it Ulfitnyar or something like that. Either one, we could make those sort of pushes. What I like about him is he gives you a nice centerpiece that does something a bit different than the faction, gives you a bit of that magic that he has, and he can be a very good linchpin. A lot of your units tend to go down pretty easy if they start getting hit. Here's a guy that won't. So I like him for what he does for this. He's a great nutcracker. The opponent has a big scary thing or a multiple scary thing. He is the potential cure for that for you, with enough of a defense to be able to maybe take that back. For honorable mention or second points, I probably would pick the gold tier. I know people absolutely love them. I absolutely love them. I think they are starting to replace Fenrir for some people that I'm seeing. Yeah, they don't help you out with your position. I'm not too worried about that. They have line picker. They got trample. Trample is absolutely amazing. Impact, and then trample means even if worst case scenario, I had a move charge, I'm getting some impact in you. I'm getting trample at the end. I'm going to get some damage into you, especially with that brutal one. And you're doing it for, honestly, reasonably cheap. Big thing, there's just a little... It's probably fine. They're not quite as fast as some other type of units like that, but they're at 6. And notice they are at 5 wounds. So they get that 1 extra wound. They have that little bit of extra survivability, which means if someone shoots them, you're a little bit more likely to have all your stands or only to lose 1 rather than, start losing most of your stands and now you break and now you can't charge. So they're absolutely, to me, I think the honorable mention for this particular faction. All right. Next one up is Spires. Essentially, I'm just doing it in the list that I had rather than the order that they put them in. For Spires. Spires, especially if we get into army rules and stuff like that, they now do vary depending on who your warlord is. Depends on what you do. Okay, are you spending extra to add more clash? If you're taking one of the lineages or the clone executor, yes. You have many units that would greatly benefit from that. Are you taking biomancers? Okay, you have that director a bit. Ferromancers, I'm honestly just not seeing. Not so much, really. If your meta is loving Ferromancers, tell me about it. I'm curious what sort of list people are running if you're really seeing them. So, for what I went with here, because I went back and forth, it is not a surprise to me that I do like shooting units. I do think they have their place. I do think they have their spots where they either don't do enough, and let's face it, a lot of times shooting units won't get you the sort of wounds that a close combat unit will, but that's not really their purpose. Their purpose there is wounds, it is for picking people off, it is for, pushing your will onto your opponent, it is about making it, well, if you're just going to sit there, or you're going to walk up slowly, you have to, decide to engage me, because if not, I will just keep hitting you. I will keep doing this negative thing to you. And that's the reason why I went with marksman clones. They're 50 a stand, 50 for an extra stands. Volley 2, not bad, but they're 5 shots arcing fire. Now, I know I said longbow wasn't a big fan of. About the same points. Also not great in terms of survivability, but I like what they're doing for this army here. And I think that's the issue I have when I look at 100 Kingdoms. When I look at 100 Kingdoms, and the reason why I was kind of miffed on Longbowmen, in case someone didn't watch it, that's the unit I'm going for, is they have a couple very shooting options. And I sort of like what those other options will do if that is your goal. So, I want shooting. Well, I have crossbows that could do something for me. At least they can score. They still have some armor piercing. The range isn't quite as good. Or, do I just want to be cheap and light? I got militia I have like, different militia type units and all, I have those options. I can go cheaper if I want. So to sit in this spot of, they don't do everything you want, but they spend a little bit too much to do the bottom tier of what you may want. What about marksman is that, you're looking at the 16 shots. You're looking at a medium unit. And like I said, I do like them for some of, not all, but for a decent amount of them. I like my shooting units to be sitting at the medium, especially these guys, because at 22-inch range, I'm now 27. If you pull up to the halfway mark on the board, I am hitting you the turn I walk on. And then I can just stand there and fire at you from then on out. What I like about that, as opposed to sometimes the lights, and I don't often try to hold my units out. I know we're allowed to. Often don't. What I like about this is, again, if my opponent has a light, then they've committed it, and I can make my decisions based off of that. And if I get these guys on, say, second turn, I'll make them the very bottom of my stack. They'll be the last thing that go. I will try not to win the roll, or if I win the roll, I'll have you go first, probably. And that way, hopefully, you've set something up. Or, the fact that I have this waiting, if you cross the halfway point, I'm going to really start peppering you with shots. It might not be with, looking at that case, 16 shots only on 2s. I'm still looking at 5 to 6 hits. If you don't have very good defense, that could be enough to take off enough wounds, or maybe almost a stand, especially if I happen to spike. I've had quite a few times where units like this just spike for me, and now you're losing stands. So I think I like them more, and I will say, I don't think the between factions comparison is fair. I try to avoid it. I especially wanted to explain a little bit here, because someone might look at this and type comments of, well, you said longbow were so bad. Interfaction comparisons are always a poor idea, because the game is not balanced around faction to faction, unit by unit, or regiment by regiment. They're balanced, as best they can be, around the whole army. So the similar tool in one could be very bad in one, or not nearly as good in one and much better in the other. Here's a spot where I think they're a little bit better. Do you have other good shooting options? Yeah, you got Leon and Avatar, which I think are nice. Hey, they have the AP2, lesser range, but they have that going for them. But just for the sort of classic, what they can do, and knowing that, yes, you can kind of buff up some characters, go in there, you can put your High Clone Executor, you can essentially make him like this. So you can do quite a bit. So I'm giving it to Marksman Clones. For my backup, I have wanted to just pick Avatar because I absolutely love Avatar. They are something I love. Good defense, good resolve, terrible wounds, not great attacks. But they have the cleave, they got the impact, they support well. I do like them. Honestly, I really, really like them. If I'm not doing that, Siegebreaker Behemoth, I think, is absolutely great. Does he always perform amazing? Maybe not. He's unstoppable now. That really helps. He's got 7 move. He used to only move 6 for anyone who hasn't played. And a little bit smite. So if you don't have an evade, he's just cut right through you. Good amount of brutal impact and all of that. He offers you a lot. So I could absolutely see picking him for sort of a backup or opposite choice. Centaur Avatar are nice. They have the flurry, which is good. Stats aren't quite as good, although you can buff them if you are taking essentially your executor or lineage. What do I actually want to pick? I'm not going to pick Abomination. I think Abomination is good. It ain't that good. Vanguard Clone Infiltrators you could talk about, because now you have a lot of move. You also have some shots in there, or Vanguard Clones. I've had some good success with Vanguard Clones just because you get swings. And you get a lot of swings, and you can add Assault Preceptor and do even more. What do I want to pick, though? From my current playstyle, loving monsters, I might just pick the Siegebreaker. Just because it is a truck. It is one of the monsters that is fearless. It's terrifying too, but it's actually fearless. Which is great, because a lot of these big things are not fearless. They just cause a little bit of fear. His impact 5 with brutal impact, now on a 7, helps him out. Unstoppable means you could be looking at the 10 or 11 charge and feel pretty good about it. And he's just awesome. Honestly, I just really like him. Is he the absolute best? Probably no. But when you look at some of these big things, you're already looking at a lot of these being somewhat expensive. 10 attacks is fine when you're on 4s, and they don't get a save unless they have evade. So you should really be doing a decent amount of damage into people. Again, we're looking at an army that has a decent amount of little bits of cleave. Figure out the right spots to go, and this guy can absolutely sing for you. So I'm going to give him back up my second choice. Do I think he necessarily deserves it? Maybe not. Honestly, he probably doesn't. But I just like him too much, so I'm going to do that. Let's face it, some of this choice of best, you can try to take biasing out of it, but there's always going to be a little bit of that because you're trying to think about the way in which you would put things. How would you put a list? What sort of items do you think go into it? And if the army has multiple modes, when I think of, say, Spires, I think you can go very large in terms of regiments, or you're going brute style regiments. So depending on which way you take that could vary up the way that you think about it. All right, forward rune. Now, like I said, we're not doing character things, which means no Thunder Chieftain, no Winglord Predator. I do think a Winglord Predator is absolutely amazing. I think Quaddles are super, super good. They probably will get the backup. The only reason they're probably not getting the main is because I've had Thunder Riders hit me too many times. I think Wadrun have a lot of very good strength units. I think you could easily make a mark for Slingers. With all that they can do, I think you can make it for Raptor Riders. Although I'm giving it to Thunder Riders. So I'm giving it to Thunder Riders for a few reasons. One, they have Juggernaut. So you're a move 6, but you can auto move, have your charge be plus a 5. Notice the regiment's charge distance is always march value plus 5. It's not affected by rules. So you can always charge 11. You don't have to worry about rolling or anything like that. So you always know that you're in charge range. You are Brutal Impact 2 with 4 impacts and Line Breaker. You have your Thundering Charge. So, hey, if you did a march and then a charge, you get Brutal plus 1. So now you're on Brutal 3 with these impact, which you're fine doing. Here, especially, you're fine doing it because you also have Trample. So for every one of them, if you're a little 3-pack, then you also get 6 auto hits at the end. So I'm 5 impact each. So I'm looking at 15 impacts on 3s, getting about 7 of them. Brutal 3. So if you don't have evades, you're probably taking almost all of that. And I said Line Breaker as well. So that's helping me out as well. Because notice it's on Clash Duel or Impact. So you probably don't have a save if you don't have evade. And then I'm getting you just 6 auto hits at the end. Just a little bit extra. I have watched Thunder Riders just roll into units and roll right through them. Obviously, putting a Thunder Chieftain in there helps. Obviously, having that Thunder Chieftain be your Warlord to get Thunderous Assault, so that way they have the shock, adds a whole lot to them. So they're essentially a good unit with a lot of upside. And I think that's what puts them to the top for me. Again, I give a little bit extra sometimes to Cav units because of what they can do and because you might need those sort of effects. And this unit gives you effects that I feel that you need. For honorable mention, it very well might be the Quaddle. Quaddles are starting, in case you haven't actually faced against one, they are starting to make their rounds. I know some lists that run 2. I've seen some lists that actually run 3. Especially you can take a Quaddle and then you can take a Winglord Predator. Good thing about that is fly, so you can just go over stuff. It impacts as well. Has its death from above. So, if you charge someone in the flank or rear, you get Brutal 2. Hey, it's easy to get flank or rear when you can fly. Regular, who cares about that? It does actually have cleave. 9 attacks, not a huge amount of attacks. Has its fluid formation, so it can be facing a direction at once. Has its shots with its armor piercing, which helps you out. Gets the free volley. Bird of Prey, there it is. And if you go over someone of size 1, so if you go over normal infantry, you get to do 5 hits. They count as flank. So I can fluid, go over someone, charge someone else. I'll do 5 hits to them. I'll do 6 impact. I will have my death from above to get some brutal impact on that. And then I can shoot. And I could shoot either of those units depending on my timing of when I wanted to do that shot. So Quaddles, especially since 15 wounds, and again, a base of evade 2, which is really nice. They are, what is the problem you can go and try to deal something into it. If the opponent is trying to hide something, you remove 9 and you're fly. So just go right past them. Hit them for 5. Fluid formation at the end. Face them from the back. Shoot them. Or sorry, fluid formation is at the very end. Sorry. And if you're doing 3 additional reform there, then you can just make sure this is clear. You only get 3 total actions. So if you do your fluid formation, you do not get to do your free shooting if you've also moved and charged. But you could just go over someone, fluid. End of all its actions. So no, you can't fluid and then shoot. But you're tall, 14 inches. That's less than you move. So I can shoot, do some damage, fly over you, fluid back to you. Or if that was too many actions, shoot, move to get behind you. Next turn, fluid, hit you. So I'm giving it to Thunder Riders, but I could probably switch to the Quaddle pretty easily, especially if you let be a Wing Lord. So I think there's plenty of other good options here. Like I said, Slingers are good options. Some of your Chosen are pretty good. A lot of your other stuff is kind of fine. Raptor Riders are really good. Tontor obviously is great and wondrous. But I'm going to give it to Thunder Riders. I think when I'm standing there, concerns I see, if I know they're taking them, how many, where are they going? Because that is something I'm going to have to deal with. Same idea for Quaddle, but I'm going to give it to Thunder Riders. All right, moving right along. We are going to go to Old Dominion. Old Dominion, again, I'm not allowing characters for this, so I'm not going to choose Fallen Divinity. I think that's kind of a cop-out anyway. You know, the super strong, expensive model that's 9 killable, that's 3rd level, is your best thing. Probably. But you then have to run a list around here. If you're not going to take a list for her, she's bad. You have to run a list that actually supports her. And there's ways to do that. I did a video in the past. Some of it's changed a little bit, but the basic ideas haven't. When I look through this, again, I was trying to ask myself, what do I feel I need? You know, Bone Golems and Bucephaly, I could swap to either one. They're both going to be able to slam into someone, do all that sort of damage. We have, Centaurs as well as our Cataphracti for a Cav. And Cataphracti are probably better, but hey, you got Centaurs as well. They're pretty good. You have Anatheti if you just want lots and lots of swings. You have Ranking Guard if you want really good cleave and you want it in a human-sized frame. You have Cares, not as good as they used to be because they've nerfed the way certain they're on spell worked, which is fine. It was absolutely gross before when you could, if I rolled a 6 on defense, you did like 5 wounds to me with that one particular hit. You can look at your Canaphores and Caratids for their strengths. I'll tell you right now, my backup is Cataphracti, and I want to explain why I chose them for the backup first. The reason I chose them as backup, Cataphracti are some of the best Cav that are in the game. And the reason they're some of the best Cav is the Hypertos. So hey, Overrun, you can charge twice in a turn, and if I break you, or you're already broken on the first charge, I can do it again. Which means that I can charge, get my impact into you. You broke, I get my impact into you again. You're gone, I can now charge and go forward. So essentially, unlike most Cav units that can only wipe out a unit, these guys can wipe out 2. Notice Memory of Old, you have Shock and extra impact, so you'd be on 4, Brutal 2, Shock, so now you're on 3s, because otherwise your clash is pretty garbage. The reason I didn't give it to them, I went really back and forth on this, one of the reasons I didn't give it to them is they're very, very timing dependent. I need that Memory of Old. I have on multiple times taken a Strategos, and I will use his count the tiers 1 higher bonus in like turn 3 because the Cataphracti want to go charge. If they don't have the extra impact is very vital, but they don't have the shock, you're not getting through people. You're not going to, and that's the problem. If they get stuck, they're 5 attacks on Clash 2, and you're not allowed to inspire. Yeah, if it's tier 3 and you have those bonuses, sure. But I'm going to lose a lot of units before I get to those bonuses. And these are probably the ones I'm going to lose. I've played them and I've had them be an absolute feast or famine for me. They have been the absolute best unit on the field for me on more than one game. And there's other games where they have done nothing or I've fought against them and I'll throw a little something into them and they're neutered. They will not do anything the whole game. And I think that's the problem. I do put them as an honorable mention. I personally love them. I always take Hiervatos. I usually take them in a 4-pack, and I take them out of Strategos a lot of times. Especially because I'm on Strategos, now I can get that fluid formation, so that way I can hit someone, a free reform, not fluid formation, hit someone, turn, hit someone else. And if I'm putting characters in, yeah. Although, like I said, their feast or famine nature is the reason why I didn't pick them. So, for unit I did pick, and this will be a little bit weird, I actually went Praetorians. Here's the reason why. You can flavor to taste your heavy hitters here, or maybe for ranking guard. You can flavor to taste your lights. You can flavor to taste, do you want a lot of swings? Or even, are you running a divinity list as opposed to, I don't really do Iliarch lists, but more Strategos lists and all. But one thing you need is a spot to put your characters, potential bunkers, and currently in the current standard of the game, I find you want Dark Cenotaphs. You want to sit on an objective, getting 2 more power tokens. That means base, if this is on objective, 1 for the round, 2 for this. Now I'm looking at 3, and then a little Archimandrite, Hierodeacon grouping there means I could potentially get 5 in a round without you even doing anything to me. What I really like about them, because I faced them multiple times, they got that extra wound. Their defense 2 with shields, so they're on 3, Bastion +1. So in the beginning, what you have to remember, since you can't inspire, other than when you charge in, that means in future turns, if you're stuck in, oh, I'm still level 1, I will Memory of Old to Bastion 1. Am I now at tier 1? If I'm tier 2, it's just going to go off as a draw event, so now I'm on defense 4. If I get to, say, tier 3, where I get it as a draw event and I can use that in action, if I'm stuck in, I'm already inspired, and I'm going to defense 5. And what I like about this unit is they can just sit somewhere. You need spots to be able to do that. So, you have a variety of options depending on what you want to attack with. But if you want something that's just going to hang out, can get you extra bonuses, and can be your character bunker for your, say your Archimandrite, for someone who, does she take them? Yeah, Praetorian, she takes them there. Or Strategos or Ziliarch. I think Strategos takes them. Ziliarch I know does. Yes, but he takes them as mainstay. There it is. If you want the survivable bunker, they're where it's at. They don't get the same level of aura death that you used to. You used to be able to get them to super high aura death. You still get pretty good. I would probably still take the Dark Cenotaph because I want to go sit on an objective with these guys, score a bunch of points, and I will stick around. And if I can get late enough in the game, you're not taking me off that point because I'm sitting on defense 5 and I don't resolve. So even if you're super good cleave, I still have something, and I'm only taking that amount of damage. I never take the extras. So just because I want survivability, I want something that I can go park somewhere, gets me points, and holds on to it, I'm picking Praetorians. I will say, though, if I ever run a Strategos, yes, I'm always taking Cataphractii. Absolutely love them. I went more just because, from what I've seen lately, I want to be able to defend, where a lot of this army, they bake on the fact, or try to go with the fact that you don't resolve, so you don't lose things easily. But your defensive numbers take that into account in a lot of ways. Or your clash numbers, the fact you can't spire, takes that into account in a lot of ways. So on the hit in, on the charge in, doing pretty good, but when you're stuck in, not as much. I want something to be stuck in. And like I said, those Cataphractii, if you're not careful, someone gets the charge on you, whatever point you put in, you might as well have just thrown down the garbage. So I'm giving it to Praetorians. All right, we are on to city-states. I view them usually a bit more defensively, and maybe that's just old holdovers and all for this. So when I went back and forth, I tried to figure out, what do I feel that is something strong that they really need? And what I ended up arriving at, I think they have some good options. Again, I think the Satiri do a really great trick. It is absolutely a trick, but it's a good trick. You could absolutely make arguments for some of the other big, like the Hephaestion, or even maybe the Prometheus. I don't see them quite as much. You can make it for, the very standard Hoplites, just, your Phalangites, for your giant blocks and all of those. I wasn't big on the Hopsis as individual units, but Thyrenes, I think, can absolutely get a lot of work done. I think this is a really good focus, but what I end up giving it to, I end up giving it to the Talos. Beefy boy, beefy in points, beefy in both wounds, and if you never read his special rules are essentially whatever you would do to affect me doesn't happen. Blow the Forward God. Okay, he's giving extra priests to your priests, which are good because some of them, sounds like the Mechanist, doesn't actually have a lot of dice that it throws. Mechanist is only 5, so some of these can be tough to get off. Give me the extra 1. But hey, Descendants of the Brazen Race, no aura death, no decay. He 6 stands on an objective zone. He doesn't take lethal hits. So there's all the minuses you do. He's fearless. He has hardened, so even if you were trying to pierce through, if you have air armor piercing or anything like that, you really don't, unless you have a really, really good number and a shield. So he's effectively 4s and 4s at all times. At 20 wounds, so this guy will stick. He's very, very tough to shift. He is terrifying 1, and he has cleave 1 with his 12 attacks, so he's not the most destructive force in terms of that, but that is still good. Okay, you don't send him at the biggest, craziest monster, but you can send him at most regiments pretty well, and then you can, you can take an upgrade for 10 more points. I absolutely think you will. Mask of Arrows. So, hey, your friendly monsters gain unstoppable if you're running that kind of list. If you're not running that list, Helm of Nakia. If a friendly regiment within 8 inches charges, +1 impact. So even units that didn't have impact now get it. So if you took a giant block of someone, now they have it. So he is a force multiplier while being a good attacking piece. Again, maybe not for a giant monster brute unit, but against some infantry units, absolutely will do a good job against them. And I don't really care what rules you have that are meant to damage me, because I don't take most of those. Or at least most of the rules that are, here's this effect I'm putting onto you. No, they don't happen. So I did give it to him. I know there's a lot of lists that are running 1 Talos. I've seen a lot of double Talos lists because of what they do. Sending out this bubble, maybe for one or the other, but sending out this bubble of the impacts, giving impact, more impact to units that have it or some that don't. Blood of the Forge God, getting that extra priest bit, having all these various parts actually really helps you a lot. And it comes in a very useful package. So I'm giving it to the Talos overall. I don't think I have to explain much more of why he is very, very good. For backup, I went a lot of back and forth on this. I'd probably just give it to one of the War Chariots. Probably the Scorpios, personally, rather than the Flogoblon. The reason I would maybe give the Scorpios, not a lot of reason, but when I think about what I want, is this army, a lot of it is going to be standing in front of you, pushing forward. What's nice about this is it gets better if it gets into the flanks. And that's what I'm wanting this thing to do. I'm wanting it to rush past people, get to the flank, get behind them. I'm imagining, essentially circling them kind of thing. So, and they're good because they used to be able to take 3 and they dropped it down to 2, because this was, especially like the Heos lists, you saw, every single spot that took them had like 3. And some of them had like 2 and 2 and stuff like that. So they took quite a bit of them. So I would probably give it to them just because I think that they do something very interesting that this army likes. And that is a very mobile threat, kind of running around to the sides. And without saying, okay, they have flank, they come in, both of them do, but they come in exactly when you want. So do you need to delay them? Do so. Maybe you're waiting for a certain unit to come on. You can wait a little bit. Hardened, so they're a little bit more likely to get their saves that they have. They can impact to try to take someone out. But yeah, they have rapid volley. So, hey, when I'm shooting, my 1s get extra. So yeah, you're only looking at 8 shots. You can have quite a bit more armor piercing 1. I'm in your flanks and things like that. You'll notice with this, you have to, if there's effective range, reroll on 1s if I'm in the flank or rear. So you're going to get legitimate damage into people. So I'm going to give it to them as a backup, although I do like a lot of these different pieces here. Moving right along. The fact that I allowed myself to kind of pick like a main and a secondary made this easier, because otherwise I think it's very back and forth. All right. I'm continuing this trend of, for what I think is best is what can't you do? Because I need there when I think of best, if I don't have access to the unit, am I changing the way in which I build, put together, and prepare? And for that, I went with the Ravenar. And the reason I went with this is because it adds the things that I'm missing. One, it gives me good cleave without being in Steelheart. Because I don't take Steelheart. I don't own Steelheart. Even if I did, I probably wouldn't. It gives you Fiend Hunter, which is something that you're lacking. You know, this army tends to work on, I will just get enough swings and you will roll enough dice and fail them. You know, we now have the Maharabati Initiates with some cleave 1. You do have the Mahut, another giant monster with some cleave. And I'll put it right now. The only reason I'm not putting the Mahut there is because I think the Mahut with the Maharaj is the way to do it. And I'm not putting towards characters. But if you are running this army, a Favorite Hormus Mahut is absolutely amazing. But I look at this because you're getting cleave that you don't have. You have Arcane Conduit, so I'm going to get some extra ritual points. And I have Elemental, so I can have this guy move, charge if necessary. Or move, charge, attack, which means that their monsters are not in my range, I am in their range. And even if worst case scenario, all I do is move, charge, I have my 5 impact and I have some aura death so I can get something onto you. But move, charge, attack, now I'm essentially at 14 plus the d6. Not unstoppable. But hey, if it actually is a monster or anything bigger, you have Hubris. So you get +3. So you're really a 17 plus. So if it is a actual monster, you cannot charge me. I can charge you if I wait for the right turn, and I do. And then decent enough survivability to be able to survive it at the end, and last word if necessary, just to get 8 auto hits from a caster into someone. And I've absolutely had that, use that, and had it finish off units for me. Let's hit Born of Flame, which is the one I prefer. Backup is obviously just Sword Dancers. Sword Dancers are great. You get 6 attacks each. You have some impact. They're elemental as well, so they can essentially get that move, charge, or move, charge, attack. Infernal Branding, which can be very useful because I'm running a lot of fire. I guess the only reason I picked them is because you have a variety of, they're super great. And honestly, they're probably one of your main things, but you have a few other things that do a good amount of attacks. You could take Ghouls. Ghouls have a good amount of attacks. Not so much Roger Kerr. But when I look at the rest of this, what's the next thing I know I include is Sword Dancers. And the only reason I probably put the Ravenar in front is because his Arcane Conduit cleave 2 abilities. These guys don't cleave. I'll drown you in attacks, and I will have tons and tons of attacks. But also at 5 wounds, I have watched them go down pretty easily on 3-3-1 instead of 4-3-1. So I've absolutely watched that happen. And like I said, I'm just relying on you not rolling well. This guy gives you the option of, I don't care what you have. And if you happen to actually be a brute or monster, I'm much more likely to actually get almost all 12 of those hits. So now I'm carving through something that maybe the other guys wouldn't quite do it, but they are serving very different purposes. This is going against anything that's not giant and heavy, and he's going against the big heavies. So I'm giving it to him, but these are a very close second, and I could absolutely, depending on the day, I will flip-flop these two. But unlike some of the other factions where I can make arguments for other units, I can't really argue for any other unit here. Maybe Windborn Jin. I've been liking Windborn more than my Flamecasters, just because, again, a little bit of AP and a much better range. The rest of my army is going to get up close. I'd rather be able to hit you from range. So these are my top 2, but for the right now, I'm going to put this Rakshasa up there. All right, we are on to last faction, and we're going to talk Yoroni real fast. For this one, I went back and forth of what I wanted to pick. Oh, they actually put some more picture in for the Damashi and all that. Very nice. Didn't see that. Oh, I guess it must be finalized then. The last time I saw it, they weren't sure about finalization, but they had the picture. It must be. I think there's 2 units that I would pick for the best. I'm going to talk about the reason why I pick one over the other. I'm going to pick Tengu Akiyashi for my best. And the reason I'm picking that is because they do the one thing your army doesn't do, and that is damage from range. You don't have a lot of stands. Everything is a brute or a monster other than Shikigami, which are bad. So I don't care what they are. Which means I'm just not going to have as much stuff as other people in general. So I can't trade stand for stand. Can't do it. One good way to not trade stand for stand is to be able to shoot those stands ahead of time. The fact that you can take these in a little 2-pack with 9 shots on 3s, 4s if you aim first, and keep in mind, as it says there, command special rule, in addition, you get Vanguard. So if you're shooting at me, I have Tenacious 1, and if that's a command stand, which they're only command stands for each other, that means I get Vanguard 4. So that means I could, if you're nowhere near range, move another 4, so I go up to 18 if I want to. Or that effectively means the turn I come on, I am a 25-inch threat range. Because I'm a 7 move with Vanguard for 11 inches, 14-inch shot. If I already have a reinforcement line, say from my Damashi, someone who's light, then I can come in from the side. And with that, you're only 2 wide, so you're not nearly as concerned about where that reinforcement line is. Being, say, 12 inches up on a 2 wide will absolutely get you further ahead than if you just came in from the back, which means I can get some shots on you. And then the next round, hey, the Damashi rush in front, I can shoot right through them. Yes, you do have to synergize for this, but this army requires synergy, more so maybe than any other, because you have to be very careful with the way you have things happen, because you can't take the just the chaff losses. You really don't have that, at least not nearly as much as other factions do. So I'm giving it to them, and they do. I said they have fly, which helps if I need to, and adding a food card absolutely is very good. Them activating off a food card helps because then you get a little bit more move. So now you can actually get even 2 further inches, so you can really get up there up the board. Runner up, and the only reason I pick it overall, again, yokai. I think currently all my lists, okay, I can make a list that doesn't include the Genyu no Yokai because I have some other monsters or other units. I'm currently not making any list that doesn't run a minimum 1 Tengu Akiashi, oftentimes 2. I do think the Genyu no Yokai is absolutely amazing. Cleave 3 is great, being able to grab a battlefield roll and keep it forever. I think it's the Enlightening Fury. Yeah, you keep those effects, means if you trigger it correctly, this thing is an absolute monster, especially when it gets to evade 3 because of Mew, and stays that way. But you do have some monster characters. You do have another monster, the Dai Yokai. So you could run other ways. However, I don't foresee myself not taking Tengu Akiashi. Although again, I've only played the faction twice, and I've only played with the Genyu no Yokai once. I'm currently feeling like I always wanted in there, but I will mention, if anything's going to change, this one might be pulled back a little bit. So, or maybe the other one's kind of buffed up because it does kind of feel like the best. But if that is the case, I'm looking at the Tengu definitely then for sure. And again, normally I don't do units that haven't come out. I didn't say that earlier, but normally my thought is not to do units that haven't come out. But other stuff is really out, so it's kind of have to. All right, and that will do it for what we were discussing tonight. So we went through the units that we thought were the best. For a brief review of what we picked, I have to scroll back on my notes. Crimson Tower for the 100 Kingdoms, although we put Gilded Legion as the backup. When it came to Dweg, we gave it the Fire Forged, although we did say Flame Berserkers as a good backup. When I went to Nords, we went Ice Jotnar, but probably Gold Tier as the backup. And again, depend on the day, I will swap which one's which. For Spires, I went with Marksman Clones. And backup, I think I went Siegebreaker. Although part of that one I will say, I try not to bias too much. That one's a little bit biased. I just love it. When we look at Wadru, we gave it the Thunder Riders with the Quaddle being our reserve choice there. For Old Dominion, I gave it to Praetorians with Cataphracti as the backup. I think that's probably the one that might be most contentious. I don't know. For City States, gave it to the Talos and then the Scorpios for our backup. Varna for that particular Rakshasa for Sorcerer Kings, with just free flame. Sorry, Sword Dancers. My apologies. Sword Dancers for the other choice, and for Yoni, I gave it to Tengu Akayashi and the Genyu no Yokai as. Honestly, I think it's probably going to get a rules adjustment before it comes out, so I don't want to say it's the best, because I think it might be exceedingly strong, at least in my current attempt of what I played. But yeah, that's what we have. So, I'm curious to see what people think. Again, I do actually this weekend I have time, so I'm going to sit down, read comments, I will respond to them and things like that. As long as your comment isn't, anything actually offensive, I don't remove stuff. I don't care if you agree with me or not. I find, good discussion, disagreements actually give you a lot, and you get a lot more fun from that. But as long as it's nothing rude, you feel free to say whatever you think. That's absolutely fine. Keep in mind, if you do want to pick up any of this stuff or the Yoroni that are coming out soon, that we do have that discount code. It's Train Kickers, saves you 10%, helps out the show as well. We do thank everyone who does use it. There's been a good amount of people who have actually used it. And listen, I push that instead of pushing our Patreon because, one, I haven't put enough updates on that. I really have to be better about that. I know I've been bad about that. But also because the Conquest one, you get stuff out of as well. You get literal models. So, no better way to have a back and forth sort of thank you than you're doing something for us, but we're also making sure that you pay less for really fun models to work with. For almost all the models are pretty fun. Some of them are a little bit tough. Actually, I know they showed the picture for the Mashi. So I know they said the last time I saw it, they were talking about whether or not that was finalized. Their look, because they're like, oh, we don't know yet. Actually, do they even have them? Taking a look on the other screen. So for other things you see coming out, I have a super busy weekend. Oh, they didn't actually have the painted picture on the store. They just showed it in the builder. So that's very interesting. Okay. I have a very busy weekend, so I don't know how much other things I'm going to get to. But for other things I want to end up talking about, at least for this, I want to make a more general video talking about what makes good and bad. How essentially approach of this, I want to talk about whether or not miniatures games can be balanced and what does balance mean in a miniatures game, because I think it is a more nuanced conversation. Might try to have some of the other guys on, but I know just their schedules haven't worked too great. And honestly, like right now, it's like about 1 o'clock in the morning when we're recording this. They can't necessarily do that. So essentially when the mood strikes and the thoughts are flowing, that's when I sit down and record. Usually for these best and worst, I do come up with the list ahead of time. I spend a good bit of time doing that, putting myself some notes, and then I do it. So I said before, I'd like to get more recordings with them. I want to get back to doing more battle reports. Just haven't been able to lately. I know pretty soon it's spring break for me, which gives me a chance to finish all the stuff on my painting desk. Got a whole bunch of stuff right over here, actually, that you can't see. Everything you see on that side is actually pretty much painted, although some stuff in that Song of Ice and Fire box isn't. And actually, we're getting some new updates somewhat soon for our Song of Ice and Fire, so very excited for that, for me and my Martells. So you'll be seeing some of those. Probably will be seeing that next week, though. That Learn to Play video, I a little bit more than I have to do on that. Just been very busy with work, so I am going to be able to get to it as much as I want. So, and plus, in case I have to re-record something, I don't want to promise a particular date on that. But if you don't see it next week, you would see it the week after, because I have the week off. So no matter what, I have time, because like I tell my students, I don't give you work over spring break because I know I'm not going to do any. I'm going to paint a bunch of models and maybe play Stasis Bone Totem or something like that. Different random cheap things I got from Steam. Which if you haven't played the first Stasis, it is very good. If you enjoy Aliens, you would enjoy it. And then, board games have all that kind of stuff as well. All right, well, I think that is enough for this particular video. So, on behalf of everyone here at the show, then, it's a good hobbying. It's a great gaming.